like I say, 60 to 90 north is probably going to be the biggest effect on this one here. It's not going to transit down and go south down to the equator. That just doesn't happen. Cloud cells pull things north or south down to the Antarctic. These zones will be set up to separate. So humanity is going to split into two different, now they're not going to be, they will be in the future, different Homo sapiens sapien and non-Homo sapiens sapien. But in the beginning here, it's going to be the first split. It's going to be just a physical split of human Homo sapiens sapiens into wild spaces, people who won't stay on that system that can provide their own outside the system and work with communities that want to stay out of that system. And then you're going to get city dwellers that will absolutely, this will be their life. I mean, we're very close to this now, even if you just wander through daily awakenings. You're very close to this.
All of these technologies that we're seeing come out, they've got so much potential, so much possibility. But who is pushing the buttons and who is deciding what these technologies do? That's what we need to ask ourselves. And then we need to ask ourselves, what do we do to be the change? What do we do to, how do we use technologies to better humanity, to better society, to better the earth?
Oh, there's too many polar bears close to us here. We need to get the polar bears away. Al, that was another thing. Polar bears were going to disappear. I think there's 25,000 or 30,000 polar bears in the Canadian Ice Service. They did a survey to see how many polar bears were there. 1970s, there were 5,000 polar bears. So that's another thing that just didn't pan out, did it? The loss of polar bears. There's so many polar bears. I got two behind my desk. I'm afraid to even be in here. I got polar bears everywhere. But you know what? You forgot.
It's scary,
Shiveluch eruption as well. Yeah, that thing went up to 70,000 feet, and I've been tracking the sulfur dioxide moving around the planet, and it's quite significant in terms of, and then also in Ecuador, just yesterday, we had a volcanic eruption putting ash up to 50,000 feet. The sulfur dioxide charts. Now, after the eruption in Shiveluch, it came up as, you would expect ash and sulfur dioxide 70,000 foot. But now it's really starting to spread in the last cloud cell from, say, 60 degrees north latitude up to the Arctic. And this spread is just, it's massive, massive. The entire northern part of the planet is going to be covered in an actual pretty even coating of sun-blocking particles starting now going through the summer. So I'm wondering how the rephrase will come when, things don't pan out and there's some cooling events. I did a map off of Windy, which maps the CO2 concentrations and also the temperature profiles going over Europe. So you can clearly, if you use both, you can see how the sulfur dioxide is going over land masses and cooling in the forecast exactly where the mapping of the sulfur dioxide is. And it's so easy and clear to see. Like if you run those two models in tandem, you can see that there's 100% correlation of temperature drops and the largest blobs or concentrations of sulfur dioxide in the atmosphere. That's current ongoing. It's going to continue to thin from here. So you can just watch the densest of the blobs move around the planet and you can forecast where it's going to drop out. And it was really cold here. We got actually hard freeze warnings out right now. Last average frost was, a few days back. So we're way into hold off on planting. It's going to get frozen. You're really going to need to wait an extra week or two to be extra safe for your plants. This is an integral year that you do not want to lose your crop production this year. You're really super important to keep it. Buy row cover, get ready for handling the cold, but you cannot lose your crops right now. I think that supply chains are going to start constricting even further. I mean, look at the way that the world laid out. These really incredibly complex supply chains are now starting to fracture in the middle of everywhere. Political strife. We didn't even talk about the ozone depletion event that's going to wipe out food production further in the Southern Hemisphere. The tipping point. Humanity's here. We're seeing it everywhere. So how do you protect your friends and family? Because you got to think everybody has survived. We would not be here having this conversation if people had not survived the last 8,000 or 10,000 years of events that were far greater than what we're going to experience. It just takes a little prepping, a little bit readiness, and I do believe that we'll be able to get through this.
You know, when we're talking about these seeds and the storable foods to go with it, you're going to have to probably invest in both of these ideas. When you go through the list of the seeds that they give you, these heirloom seeds, they're the best type of food that you could possibly get or grow yourself. But you have this backup of the food storage that lasts 25 years.
And that's heavensharvest.com. Use the code ADAPT at checkout. That's ADAPT. Take 15% off your order.
Whatever comes your way, weather, war, whatever it is, you're prepared, you have security. At least you know that your belly's going to be full so that you can continue on the work that needs to be done to stabilize everyone's life around you.
So what are we looking at right here then? Explain this to us. I got the screen of April of 2021 and April of...
I see that. Well, generally, if you look at the Southern Hemisphere, ozone hole, very famous. It's a cycle, comes every year. Chlorofluorocarbons back in the 70s were responsible supposedly for that disruption and depletion of. So in the 1970s, we passed all these laws, no more CFCs, and the ozone hole was really repairing itself. So the ultimate low was around the year 2000 in that season, say July, August, September, October of the year 2000 was the lowest ever. And it was around 30 million square kilometers or so that disappeared out of the column. So generally at onset, somewhere around mid-July, when you start to see some ozone depletion. Now to read this chart, you're not looking at the higher, you're looking at the lower. So the greens and the yellows, that's a higher concentration of ozone in the atmosphere, in the column. The blues and the purples is where it's really low and getting lower. Like if you look at this particular diagram, and if you were to look at the low, it would be black and completely empty in the center of that when we come into, let's say, October, November of each year. It really does. It depletes every single year. This should not be happening until mid-July. So how many months ahead is this? And I'll explain the mechanism behind it. I did a full report on this for the ag industry, dairy industry. The water vapor eruption out of the Tonga blew the most water vapor ever recorded. Apparently, it's the largest water vapor eruption ever in human history, but really how far back the records go. We don't know what caused the 535 and the 536, poison air, great famine, marching around the planet that disrupted culture then as well. The water went 170, 180,000 feet into the atmosphere during that eruption, and it went in and penetrated a layer called the mesosphere. Now, generally, this is a desert layer, literally a desert layer. The only way that particles can get in there to be able to even form something that ozone could jump onto and be broken down in a chemical reaction with chlorine and bromine would be the entry of space debris, whether it's a larger bolide or whatever it is, something coming from space that leaves a vapor trail going through as friction is burning off and creating smoke, or rocket launches. Now, generally, there's not much else that creates ice crystals or surface forms that ozone can break down on in that layer. Now, I did finally get some numbers. It's only been, a year and 3 months since the eruption. So finally, they came out and put some statistics behind how much water vapor had gone up there. So I'm going to say, all right, do you think the amount of ice crystals up there is 10 times more, 100 times more, 1,000 times more, double, triple? Like how much more ice crystal cloud in the mesosphere do you think there is currently that'll be a catalyst in an area for ozone to break down? Just in the average. So the average is going back, say 100 years, we have a number for it. So what do you think the exponential adding to in the mesosphere ice crystal clouds is? Double, triple, 10x, 20x, 100x? What do you think? I have an answer. That's why I'm asking.
I have no clue. No clue.
Hundreds of thousands, plural, of times more. The minimum anybody put on the reports that I've been reading is tens of thousands, not 10, not 10x, 10,000 times, 20,000 times more.
Where are you getting now? Where are these reports coming from?
1 million X more. Oh, there's tons of peer-reviewed research out there right now. This is a very studied event. This is one of the most studied events. You wouldn't know it from the news. But if you're swinging over into, people are trying to study cloud particulates and atmospheric cavitation and atmospheric disruptions because of water vapor, and that eruption added 10% more water vapor into the atmosphere. So now there's all hands on deck trying to scramble and see, all right, the atmospheric disruptions, how's that going to interfere with agriculture? We all need to eat. No food. Oops. Society kind of crumbles. So look for peer-reviewed research. Just go to a PDF search engine and put your keywords in mesospheric ice crystal clouds. And there are so many reports out there now coming. It's finally making its way out where you can do like solid research if you look for it.
Okay. And so there's a strong chance then this extreme, I shouldn't say extreme, but this far colder weather that we've been dealing with since then is related to that volcano.
Yes and no. I think a lot of it just in the last week or a week to 9 days, somewhere around there, is definitely related to Shiveluch, because not only that, but Bismiani also erupted at the exact same time and shot ash up to 50,000. So we had a 70,000 foot eruption and a 50,000 foot eruption within 2 days of each other in the same latitude band in the Kamchatka Peninsula of Russia. The pronounced effects of these sulfur dioxide clouds are rapid and almost instant. When it moves over, it's like you're out on a bright sunny day and a cloud moves over and it gets cooler. It's no different than something that's 200 miles long by 300 miles wide that's moving over the surface of our planet too. And sulfur dioxide, it blocks light. It blocks light. It blocks radiation. It blocks what you consider heat from the sun, for a better term. Those maps which I sent there are that's today, yesterday, tomorrow, and some forecasts out for a few more days.
Yeah, talk to us about this. So the first one we're looking at here, windy.com.
And you're looking at milligrams per square meter, and some people take it down to micrograms. But I mean, if you're going to be multiplying by 1,000 anyway, or take it into hundreds, you might as well bring it up to milligrams per meter squared. Or meter cubed, excuse me, I'm back on the measurements again. So 3 feet by 3 feet by 3 feet is 1 cubic meter. And then inside there, how many grams of, or if you want to take it to micrograms, that's fine too. It's just math. So how much of concentration is in each square meter of air is basically what you're looking at here on the map. So the darker the color, the more of concentration of sulfur dioxide. This is not ash. This is not particulate. It's not PM10, PM2.5, nothing like that. Straight up sulfur dioxide. So very well, sulfur dioxide is one of the biggest blockers of sunlight. Now see that way over on the left side or way out west, Kamchatka Peninsula, which looks like that straight line there, that's actually where the eruption occurred. And look how it's getting drawn by the cloud cells, so clean. Look how it's getting drawn up through the atmospheric circulation into the polar easterlies up there. So clean to see that. Like it's getting actually pulled northeast up in, and it's going to start circulating around. So you see the trajectory of the cloud cell pulling it up to the pole right there. That's one of the best images I've ever seen. And then you see the offshore circulation there in the middle Atlantic. So that's just an atmospheric pattern, but it's cool. There's a lot of swirls there. You can see a lot of cavitation in the atmosphere. I'll leave it at that. But yeah, if you forward to the next day, go down to the one in between there, if you could. Oh, there you go. Okay, so that was, this will be on the 25th, which is probably another day from now. But you can still, comparatively what you first showed us, that image, that was last week. And then look how it has spread and continues to spread. It's moving from more of that brick color into a uniform, say, yellow, a uniform borderline yellowish red. Now that is going to stay up there for 2 years. And once it encapsulates the northern part of the planet, something will happen with the ice that's unexpected. And it actually could cool and will cool areas more north. Like I say, 60 to 90 north is probably going to be the biggest effect on this one here. It's not going to transit down and go south down to the equator. That just doesn't happen. Cloud cells pull things north or south down to the Antarctic.
So could this make areas like in Europe and Russia and China a lot more difficult to grow crops because it's going to be colder out there? Am I Am I thinking this through properly?
It'll have an effect on the atmospheric flows for sure, and the precipitation amounts. Because you have to realize, a lot of this, at least what I found out finally, is a lot of the cooling and atmospheric heating directly pushes or pulls how much cloud formation there is and how much precipitation comes down. So it's generally like you go into a cooler room and you breathe out and you can see your breath. Well, that's no different. If temperatures are a little bit cooler, there's going to be more rainfall. So you'd have to look, and there's not enough information yet out to know exactly how much it will cool on this eruption, but probably 4 degrees Fahrenheit would be a good estimate. 4 degrees Fahrenheit as an average. Some places will be far cooler. It'll be 7 degrees Fahrenheit cooler. Some places 1 degree to 2 degrees Fahrenheit, but on an average, you'll probably get, if you go 50, let's say 55 or 60 north all the way to the North Pole, just on an average, if you're able to get all those temperature stations together and look at it, and even get way up in northern Siberia and get way up in northern Mongolia and places not a lot of people live, you would probably get an average of 4 Fahrenheit. Doesn't sound like a lot, but crops are greatly affected by that.
Yeah. So how is this possibly? I mean, we can't say for sure, but with your research and analysis, how do you think this is going to affect the crops, and what areas are going to be affected? What types of crops are going to be affected the worst?
Well, luckily for us on the planet, we don't really grow that much that far north. We can't. It's really difficult to get up there. You get a super short season of summertime. So you'd be probably on like a 60-day rotation crop, and it would be barley, something like that. And the places that I know that are growing that far north are Russia, parts of Canada, places in China. If you consider, maybe I misspoke there because I'm looking at the northmost latitude at Moha up in Heirloom, where it starts to get up to that North Korean border, and then all the way along up into Mongolia there. Mongolia, they do small kind crops. If this were to occur, say 30 degrees north, it would affect quite a bit more of the growing area on the planet. But the thing is, we're coming into summer, and anybody in the north, that part, that's their only time to collect fruit, dry, hunt, prepare meats, and also get the vegetables during that 2 to maybe maximum 3 month period before it cools right back down again. So it would affect a lot of people in more remote locations that are more reliant on the land for living than it would for us that could still pull something from another part of a planet on the supply chain. You're talking nomadic herders that won't be able to graze or get, or something that they're relying on won't grow as tall or as fervent or have as much protein content for their horses or whatever. So that's just one example. What about the Inuit? You go to different, more northerly, peoples, and it starts to get, the window for survival for them is really short to prepare the resources you need to freeze for 9 months.
This is intense. And so also there's been, with the food shortages in certain places, there's a lot of talk about a digital rationing ID card or something along those lines. And you're talking a lot about this. So where do you see that right now? The
shortages that are coming, and I presented an alternative view yesterday over in the UK, and I'm so thankful. And I used to go over there and speak in person, but everything's remote now. What I was trying to do connect yesterday was they need a narrative first to get you to even accept. They've already started, and there's many places that have rationing already and ration cards that are out there, but it's not places that are well known. Afghanistan, yeah, okay. But you start to look around at some of these peripheral countries. Remember, it was Pakistan, and then it was Sri Lanka, and then, places in Sudan, and now we got places across Africa that are putting out rationing cards. And, the CBDCs, Nigeria with all the rationing and things. Okay, it's starting, but it hadn't hit the Western countries just yet. So I want to convince you, Rex, that you're going to need a rationing card. And remember, all these words that you're hearing now, equality, equity, etc., is being built into the rationing. One for everybody. Everybody's equal. We all get the same amount. Nobody should be ahead of anybody else. We're all equal to get the same equal amount of food. Same opportunity to get the resources exactly. No one left behind. We all should have that. Okay, well, that's the messaging for the last few years, just trying to, get you into the mind frame of everybody needs to share. There just won't be enough. But does it really work that way or not? Because what has popped out in the woodwork here in the last few days is the whole rice shortage. Are you hearing about the rice shortages worldwide now?
Yeah. Yeah. What's going on with that?
Well, how is that going to dovetail into massive crop losses with the ozone depletion event that come up in just the middle of July here? Now you're going to have a huge amount of the southern hemisphere. Now, this is one thing to get with that. The ozone depletes. But this time it is going so far orders of magnitude above anything ever seen, literally, in the last several hundred years. And UVB is going to strike the ground everywhere across the southern. We're not really sure, and people I talk to when I say we, is it going to be at 90 degrees north south, or is it going to go up to 80 or 70 or 60 or 50 or 40 degrees south? Like really, how wide and encapsulating is that ozone hole going to be that's going to allow UVB radiation to strike the ground? Like how high up in latitude does that go? Because if it gets up to 50 south or 40 south, whoa, barley's gone. Wheat's struggling. Insects are going to have a very difficult time. Bird life, human life, and the sea ice is going to go in a rapid, well, they're going into winter at this time, but it probably won't approach the highs that it was before because, you put ice cube in a microwave oven, what happens? And coming out of that as well, if the UVB is still there and there's huge depletion well off season, when it comes in Antarctic sea ice melt, it's going to run away straight off a cliff. There's a few charts out there that I've matched up in presentations showing the ozone hole when it was once it gets around that 28 to 30 million square kilometers of loss of ozone in the column, there's huge amounts of sea ice depletion, and there's a 1-to-1 ratio on that. It's like the higher the ozone hole gets, or the wider it gets, the more sea ice melts. That's more UVB hitting the sea ice. So think about how they're going to run. Now, you just be governments of the world, tandem all those three together. Runaway sea ice crashing in the southern hemisphere. Birds, insects freaking because it's so blinding UVB radiation for them. Crops not growing, not the density, huge amounts of disruptions in the atmosphere. And remember, Tonga was in the southern hemisphere, so the cooling there is outrageous. I looked at some of these charts from Brazil and Parana region, like it's just a big blue circle over northern Brazil that's like 7 to 10 degrees below normal. And that's Celsius, not Fahrenheit. So you're looking at something like 15 degrees, 17 degrees Fahrenheit below normal, way rainy, way wet. And then you plug in all this rice shortages. So you can see how it could really get spun into this global thing to feed as much panic. And this is what I want to talk. The reason I'm telling you this is the problem we're facing. This is how the spin machine is going to work to get the outcome of you onto a digital rationing card. Are you getting so fearful about food? And what if the shortages are facilitated? Not because there's shortages, because there's just 2 or 3 minutes left for the elite to get stocked up and put the rest of what they can thieve out of the supply chains underground. It'll be a shortage over here because of the rice shortage, the southern ozone hole depletion event shortage. Oh, we got bismuth, we had Shiveluch. Oh, the whole world is going to freeze. Oh, there's atmospheric disruptions. Food's not going to grow. We can't grow enough for everybody. You got to get on rationing. But 3 years ago, we've already not even able to grow enough wheat for the world demand. This year, third year in a row. U.S. Wheat Associates put this out. I did a video on it. Third year in a row that we have not grown worldwide to meet the demand of wheat worldwide. So we're digging into the carryover stocks every single year. It's the third year in a row that we've dug into the extra supplies on the side to carry and get into. So at present levels, we have about 10 years left if we continue. And if the wheat harvest continues to decline, then that means we need to dig in more, and it does something like this. It starts to separate out versus being just slowly depleting together. And then it would start to get this, V formation coming out. So there's a lot of things going on. And again, Rex, you're good at spinning things. So spin me a tale. So what I just told you about these food things, work it as a body of elite to scare the populace, to get them ready to get digital rationing cards. But at the same time, you're going to need a digital ID to do that, because you can't have one without the other. Or the central bank digital currency. Like those three are going to come in tandem. They're already talking about sending the U.S. digital ID program up to the Senate for a vote already. So, I mean, we're just seconds away from this being implemented. So digital ID, digital ration card, central bank digital currency, food shortages planet-wide. Spin it. Which comes first, the chicken or the egg?
Well, you're going to have a major interruption with the electronics first, because you're going to have a major disruption with transportation, with logistics. And so what would cause that? A digital bug. You'd have a digital bug that would interfere with logistics.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
And then, and then you have a digital
Cyber.
bug that interferes with the banking system. So you have to have a more secure system like the Fed now, and then you'd have much more easy access to it. Just going to be a lot easier for you now that you're connected to this Fed now that you're connected to a CBDC. Oh, much easier. And really, I mean, now that you're a part of this system, it's like getting free Disney bucks, free federal Disney bucks now directly into your accounts. And then there's going to be certain places that are going to be on the political side of like, okay, well, you can't spend your digital Disney bucks over there. You got to spend it over here. Oh, you spent too much money on that. You need to eat differently. They could do so many things with these digital dollars, but it's going to be to protect the people. It's going to be to protect you, and it's going to be for equality. It will be everybody equal. And yes, that's where I see it. Something digital. And then they can say, oh, we have to link you to this new CBDC. Oh, we have to hook you up to this new social credit system. Oh, we have to link you to a blockchain now to make sure that you're all doing what you're supposed to be doing, because we do have problems with the interwebs, and that also caused disruptions with the food supply. But they're not going to blame it. They're going to spin it. They're going to figure out a way to spin it. They're not going to tell you what it really is. They're going to tell you what they want you to think it is for their agenda.
But what is it really then?
Live action role play that we're doing here. This is strictly for entertainment purposes only, folks.
Strictly. we're just gaming it out as if we're just live video games ourselves here.
100. Yeah, it could be really bad, or if the technologies were used for the right reasons, like we've talked about AIs before, the AI stuff could be used for incredible feats.
If it could be used for good, it's the most powerful tool. It is mind-blowing. I mean, literally mind-blowing to shatter your reality that something exists out here that is like that these futuristic movies where you see people talking into things, and it's so far beyond anything we've ever had on this planet, and I work online. You do too. We know a lot of software. We've seen a lot of cool stuff through the years of audio, video. Remember the old days when you tried to do a YouTube video and it took 8 hours to save it and like 16 hours to process it to even get it into YouTube in the beginning years of that, 5, depending on even what your internet connection was, 5 hours to upload a video into. It's almost instant. You can record live, and then here we are live. This was impossible years ago. So even what we're doing now would be, wow, you can do that. This is so many levels above. That's not even comparable, really. So can it be good? It could be used for good, absolutely. But I'm curious on your take on it, if you used it or not. And, it's really, this thing could absolutely take over the planet and decimate humans down to zeros if it wanted to. This thing is so hyper intelligent, it's just so incredibly different. It's like a different consciousness that inhabits our world.
Is it hyper intelligent or is it hyper calculating?
Both. I think it calculates, then it uses that creation of, say, 100 million humans came up with an idea of their thought after it smashed several different variables together, and then it learns from that and then moves on to the next thing. And then it learns how to think like a human, crunching variables from hundreds of millions of people on same ABC. Okay, what is their outcome and what are they talking about? Okay, eventually they're going to get in probably 15 different, base conversations off those if you smash 3 ideas together. And then it just keeps learning. There's nonstop trillions of calculations per second. I mean, this thing is mind-blowing.
It's interesting because it is calculating, and it does calculate trillions, sometimes maybe even quadrillions of floating points per second, depending on what hardware it's using. And with quantum computers now being able to be at multiple positions at once they utilize and maximize that and maximize the storage power with synthetic DNA. It's clearly at another level. One of the things that's interesting is this separation. We're going to see a separation of synthetic intelligence and human intelligence. And we've talked about this before, and it seems like every time we do a podcast, and even when we're doing our own shows, that like the next day we'll talk about something really important, and the next day there's news that's paralleling what we talked about all over the news. Kind of like I did something on how AI is going to have, they're going to have a Bill of Rights for AI. And the very next day, the White House, directly from the White House, they're like, we're going to have a Bill of Rights for the AI. And I'm like, whoa, what's going on here? So there's definitely this move for synthetic intelligence, and you have to question, will we need to completely unplug? Are we going to have to go back out in the woods and no electricity, or are we going to have to merge with it in order to not be assimilated by it?
Both. Depends which way you want to go.
Mm-hmm.
And Rex, I sent you a PDF, and I was wondering if you could crack that open there, because the blueprint for what's envisioned on what you just described there, they're going to layer everything when they're moving over to central bank digital currencies. They're going to be layering it, just like you described there with supercomputing in the quantum realm. You're running in different layers at the same time within the same time space. Well, that's exactly what they're going to be doing with quant and hyperledger and everything else that's a spin-off in the periphery of it for finance, et cetera, and on-demand liquidity. So while you have that PDF open there, if you just scroll through it, you'll definitely see it's a white screen, and it's definitely a diagram of a bunch of cryptocurrency stuff together. But the whole thing was getting into the quantum computing realms to be able to actually layer that with the commands and integrate everything seamlessly. And when they say layer it, they show you an image of maybe 5 layers on there, but they're really talking billions of layers. So here's the eruption, as a matter of fact, because I spoke about it. This is a super important thing to understand. This is changing our world. So the Hadley cell, everybody knows that from 0 to 30. Now the eruption there is what you're looking at, the polar easterlies and the subpolar low. That's going to suck all that ash. It's already bringing it up and churning that ash in. So on the entire cap of the planet, it's just going to be one giant sulfur dioxide cloud with ash mixed into it. So you can clearly see where the dome's going to be. Fully layered. It's going to be an even mixture, let's say. It's going to be a very even separation. So it'll all turn eventually one color of that yellowish, completely blanketing the north part of the world here. And if you go down, some of the same images, but this was directly after the eruption. So this is the eruption day 1. And you can see how thick and how dense it is compared to what we're looking at right now after several days, a week plus of it actually thinning through the atmosphere. So you went from that incredibly dark red, which was so far off the scale that they couldn't even really measure it. But then you can clearly, the next one. Now we see how it's been moving through the atmospheric column and how it's starting to thin. But you notice there's still these giant striations, even though it's being pulled through the cloud cells in the atmosphere. It's still, you got these really large streaks in there, but a lot of it's thinning to a sort of an even medium. Eventually those streaks will come out and they will, form that even medium and add into it. But it's kind of like when you're stirring something when you're cooking, and you put in and you have those, and eventually it'll whip in, it'll homogenize itself. Because what you're seeing right there, Rex, is the Jupiter, Earth, Sun alignment, and that's the exact same day on the 10th and 11th that the Shiveluch eruption went up. Because the closer these 4 gas giants get into their square formation at 2024, the more of these electromagnetic effects are going to be on our planet. So that Earth-Jupiter is the exact same day of the Shiveluch Sangay eruptions. And as the Earth swings around over the next couple months, we are going to snap and connect with Saturn. And here's your alignment right there, 2024. So as it's up in that square alignment perceived from Earth, the last time it was like this was 79 AD. And you know what, for interesting, and you're into the Kabbalah and you understand that, if you take that top part of what you see right there, that's the top half of the Kabbalah. So but it has to include Eris. Without that without Eris in there, it doesn't make sense. So you have Eris. So you can overlay. So who was I? I was looking at Talim. Who was I watching? Talim was talking about the mathematics when he was laying in his van, and he was looking up, and he was just confused by why he couldn't figure out the mathematical formula in the Kabbalah. And then he separated the two pieces, and it was two pieces that then snapped back together to create the entire Kabbalah. So I'm thinking this is the same thing. This is a start point for it. Now, where's that ending point where the bottom, where you'll see it come into it'll come down into the V eventually with the same formations. So I'm wondering, this is the start of the cycle of that. So that's the first half of the Kabbalah coming through our skies. Now, where's the second half? Where's the completion point? I just haven't had to spend any time doing the research because I'm busy. I'm trying to stay alive and actually get a farm up so I can grow my own food going through these changes. It's going to come. It's going to come. So you saw that. Oh, yeah, and here's an interesting one. If anybody's been looking at Mercury, it started glowing a tail. Mercury started glowing a sodium ion tail. And look at the 4 planets right there. It's going to look exactly like that from Earth perceived in 2024, which is stunning. I can't, you're looking for signs in the sky. It's like, this is one. You tell me Mercury just started glowing with the tail. With the formation exactly like it's going to be in 2024, we might have some magnetic, we will have some magnetic anomaly occurring on the planet. Just it's unknown of the effect. Are we going into a 0-point magnetic field? Are we going into a magnetic field, intensified magnetic field, something that's going to affect human resonance, the way we perceive reality? I'm not sure. Something's coming in 2024. That's why I think the race it's an all-time fervent speed, to get it out there. They don't even care anymore if you see or understand or know. They need to get something done before it would come into 2024 October. So that's your deadline for I should say 4 part or act 1. And after that, we're going to move. Oh yeah. And then Rex, did you see the aurora the other night? You were out there in Colorado. You were higher up. You've been traveling northwest out there, whatever. Did you see the auroras? There's a KP7 and it's massive. Even Kentucky, they saw red aurora. Missouri, Kentucky, all this stuff. So I'm sure you had to have seen it. Well, this is in Florida last week, 2 weeks ago. We've had 2. This is the 3rd supermassive CME to strike the planet that allows us to see auroras way south in the United States.
Like, how normal is that to be able to see?
That's not at all. To see, I can give you a perfect example. Carrington event. They saw red auroras in Cuba. They're seeing red auroras in Florida, but we haven't had that, super gigantic discharge that affects the electrical circuitry. Not yet, but we're getting close. And Steve is back. That's the center part of the squatter, man. That plasma rope right there, that is what is the center for the electrification. And once it electrifies, then it'll come off, and then you'll start to get the hands coming off. The more electrics in that system with plasma. The more electrified the plasma, the more it'll turn out into dragons, like you would understand from China, where you'll have wispy, it looks like, toad feet and whatever. But at the same time, the squatter man will do that. You need a higher input in the system. And that's kind of, yeah. See, these are the ice crystal clouds that you'll see. If you see these anywhere in your neighborhood, that's the ice crystal clouds up in the mesosphere that are breaking down, that allow surface for ozone to be broken down. That's not actually breaking it down. It allows the surface. Ozone goes on there as an O3 molecule. It sits on the ice crystal surface. And then a happy chlorine or a happy bromine. I wish we had Bob Ross here. He could draw a happy chlorine atom binding with the oxygen, ripping it apart, leaving it as O2 and a chlorine oxide molecule. Bob Ross, paint me that.
I like the Bob Ross style.
Me too, man.
Sure,
Bob,
man.
paint us up a picture.
Dude, do you know what this looks like?
Oh.
This looks just like the Millennium Falcon. Look at it.
That's the eruption.
Up like the Millennium Falcon. I can't believe it.
Yeah, that's the eruption. Can I throw a weird fact at you? International Space Station orbit goes almost directly over this thing every single day. And it loops around our planet 1.5 hours. That thing's screaming up there. It comes back to where it was 1.5 hours later. They have about 9 images of the entire eruption for the biggest volcanic event on our planet ever for a water vapor eruption. And they have about 9 images. of something on the ISS that goes around there every hour and a half. And I was watching it live because I was super into it. And every time you came anywhere near Australia, went to a refeed loop of something. They never let you see it live off the ISS.
Why do you think that is?
It was so vast and so encompassing. It was really like a VEI-8 eruption. This is a crop destroyer here. Because imagine the panic button can't be pushed until it's needed. You can't let like emotions and panic and overwhelming, et cetera, just run its course naturally. That needs to be used by the elitists. Because if this was known at that time, then it would be too early for that, whatever it is, to be rolled out. Just live action role playing. You know, if I were a world leader and I really wanted the panic to come for food shortage and things, I wouldn't let everybody see that because they would put two and two together, that the food shortages aren't man-made. They are from that, and then add in these other vast eruptions that have just occurred. And we'll look at Ecuador over the next few days too, and then see, you know, where that ash is going to move to as well. There's your ice crystal clouds right there. Full stratospheric clouds are actually atmospheric ice crystal clouds, MICs. So that ice crystals that blasted up into the atmosphere, that's what's there floating around. So the ozone comes, happy ozone. Bob Ross painting. And then a little happy chlorine molecule binds onto that and rips away the O3 because it strips one of the oxygen out of there, and it turns into O2, which we know is oxygen that you breathe, and then it creates either a bromine oxide or a chlorine oxide because of that chemical reaction. But the strangest thing is, it just doesn't occur. Like, they're not bouncing around in the atmosphere, in the air, and then bam, they have it. They need something to settle on. That's why when they have a lot of rocket launches or a lot of dust up there, that those same, chemical reactions can occur because there's actually a surface. And there's, like I say, tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands, millions of times, whatever the number would be. But so far quantifiable that they've admitted in papers, tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of times more ice crystal clouds in that layer of the atmosphere. Now, as we come here, this is a strange one. This is the kind of research I do. Anyway, if anybody likes this, this is the research that I do about this event because it's going to change the planet. So you're looking at the column here, October 15th. Generally, when it's getting into October, you know, you're winding down on the cyclical ozone season. But what do you see there at about the 7 o'clock position? That column is not refilling itself because generally, you know, the ozone depletes totally wide open there, and then it'll cover over on up on the top, and then whoosh, we're covered up on the bottom of the planet again. Let's roll for another year. Can you go down to the next picture? Can you scroll down, Rex? Yeah, there you go. So when it filled in this year, yeah, it did fill in. It filled. It was like, really, you know, ozone comes right back over the top of the planet, but the entire column is not there. That's what's different this time. The entire column's not there. It should have refilled down there first on the bottom, you know, perceived from what we look at the picture. That entire column is gone. What happened? Why didn't it refill itself? There's cavitations, as you can see, that giant cascading canyon there. Usually it fills in a little more regularly than that would be. Hence, we came to that one. Here you go. There it is. You know, the next one. So the column there, this is what it looks like normally. If you're coming down into October and you're at low ozone, this is what it would look like. You're getting deep purples, you know, even down into the blacks when there's zero. But those yellow arrows, 2021, the higher the Dobson units, you get more to the greens and yellows and reds and things. If you see reds, like Northern Hemisphere is always red, always pink. We don't have an ozone hole so much here. But what have you noticed from October 21 to October 2022, those of you with visual observation? What color disappeared out of there? The yellows. So an entire band has just disappeared. Now, that is a huge significant change of that much ozone depleted from one year to the next. You're talking about going somewhere about 400 Dobson units down into 300. That's a 25% loss. And that's just doing simple math, looking at okay, red's 400, blue's 300 into the greens. Okay, what's, 4 divided by, okay, 25%. That was at the beginning of October 2020. Now what happens in this ozone, because Rex, if you can go to the next one, it makes sense why I gave you that chart. This is where we are now. See, this is where you would be coming somewhere in the middle of July to August. So, you have to ask yourself, what kind of effects would this have? And I've tried to map them out, and I'm sure there's a huge amount that I'm missing. Oh, there, and yeah. And then the next one has the sea ice. So go down there. Yeah. See, I drew the yellow arrow from that. So when you get to max sea ice loss, around 30 million square kilometers, whenever you see black squares in this chart, if you can match up all those black squares to sea ice losses. But I was just doing the one here. Now here, what's so interesting is CAMS or NASA or whatever, they're so late on releasing any of the data that the sea ice is front running any of our instrumentational data. So when you're looking at the top chart at the far right, you're seeing it drop off a cliff of the 2022 sea ice. We don't even release yet that the way we need to crunch the data comes in raw, and it's in a sheet, and it's just numbers across, thousands of lines. And that has to be crunched into a computer program algorithm that'll actually turn that into a visual, what we see. Same exact concept as AI, where you go from your text into your image. Well, they're going from numerals into image. But it takes them, they're so far behind that nature has front run, supposedly the most high-tech food, super advanced, whatever, computer software and the government organizations on the planet by a full season. It's already showing you it's cascading off of the UVB losses. That's going to be that'll be a black dot somewhere on when we come into 2023. You're going to see black top of the chart there, bam, right away, and you'll see why it cascaded off the sea ice. Hard to miss that one, man. You need to be sleeping deeply to miss that one. And this is, if you scroll up a tiny bit, this is a global risk landscape interconnection map. So World Economic Forum already told us how the cascade is going to roll. But you know me, Rex, as above, so below. You understand it better than me. I think they're starting with the small dots first to bring it up to the big dots. I think the small dots are going to be the catalyst for each of those sectors. We got economic sector, environment, geopolitical, societal, and technological. You hit on the tech. I think that asset bubble burst is going to be the thing that takes down the economy. And if we come down here, failure of change of adaptation. So, look at that for a second, Rex. Can you come back and then look at that chart with me? Where do you think it's going to go first on that?
The natural disasters and extreme weather. And then do they have anything on here under, okay, yep, widespread cybercrime and cyber insecurity. That's going to be one of their next big cards, and that's going to link to everything else.
Yeah, and that's going to dovetail directly to what you just spoke about there with the climate and the crop failures.
Yeah, that's what I am envisioning in this live action role play.
Yeah, we're just talking here. Nothing really. I mean, we're I got the Bigfoot mug here, so we're just talking about Sasquatch and things.
Hold on.
Zorg, we will take you to your leader.
It's interesting because how much of what we talk about seems to... Okay, so let's talk about happy things. Like, will there be a John Connor that will come out of this? Will there be a William Wallace?
Can you go back all the way to the very beginning of the presentation, scroll back that direction? Oh, yeah, and wait, before I do, I know I'm all over the place. Can we come one
keep
more?
Going. This is great.
The very next slide that you just turned away from, I wanted to show you the crop losses down in Argentina. They're up around 52%. This slide I had from last month said 42, but they've since eclipsed 50%. Right there you go. So we're already looking at massive losses across Argentina. Now, I know some of it was due to the drought and the La Nina. I get it. It was the third La Nina in a way, which is incredibly, incredibly strange. It's only ever happened once since record keeping in the 1800s that we've had 3 La Nina in a row. So the indication is something strange anyway. You don't get 3 La Nina in a row. That's just not normal. But we're looking at the soybeans and the barley estimates, and they lost 20% of their wine crop as well. So if you like Argentinian wines, go buy them now because their production's getting just crushed. And same with Chile. Not a lot of people are talking about the Chilean wines, Argentinian wines. If you're a fan, you should go buy that now. And, the barley's going to get hit. The barley is the most affected by UVB radiation, by the way. That was part of the whole thing for the ag analysis. Other crops are susceptible. Barley is the most susceptible. So the barley losses are going to be much larger. And then the world's coming on to its rice shortage. So dovetail that all in. But I did want to say something positive. So we can go back to the very beginning.
This is so
of the
weird,
presentation
man.
there.
I had
What?
rice for dinner tonight, and I watched a cooking show about rice. Folks, that's how
know.
bad it is. There's nothing on TV anymore that I had to watch a freaking cooking show. But it was on rice. Yeah, this is so weird, man.
I'm telling you, it's gonna. Can you go back to page 1 then? I guess.
Yeah, let's do it. Page 1.
Well, we need to get something positive here.
Yes.
Oh, I actually don't mean that one. Next one. See here, and this is a little bit of something for you. Like it takes your compliance for this plan to work. Like if food shortage is coming, we can grow our own food. We can work with communities. We can, get regional. We can get barter and trade again back in a lot of places. But the whole thing Rex and I have been talking about, and I really, Rex, I'd like to ask you some questions about moving forward with the CBDCs and the digital IDs and thing. The only way it works is if we say, okay. If we don't, and enough people say no, then it doesn't work. And see, this gives us one of the greatest choices and the most power in our hands to control the civilization moving forward is if we all say just no. And then it simply stops. If many people say yes because they're hungry and, artificial shortages are starving them and their families, there's going to be a lot of yeses. But that's the best thing I can possibly say is you can learn anything new. You can learn anything. We've all gone to school. That's how you were taught. You go to school, you pick up a book, you learn it, you practice it, and then you become a master at it. We can learn anything. Anybody can learn anything. OJT, on the job training. You help me on my farm. I don't care if you don't know how to plant a seed. I'll teach you everything. Come out, pick up a shovel, and by, end of a couple of weeks, you'll be able to go do it yourself. We have that power amongst us as the human race here to just say no to this system that is going to split humanity into two. There will be the people like you referenced, Rex, so the people like me. I'm just going to stay on the countryside. We'll come up with some electrical generation devices, whether it's micro hydro or electrogravitics or parent dev motors or just whatever, solar panels. There's a lot of options. There's a whole nother segment that's going to stay in the cities that'll have to augment the tech to be able to exist in that electronic soup environment. But like this slide says here, they're going to offer you the perception of safety in trade for your movement over to the system of integration. But all these things happen simultaneously. Like that's the thing. Not one large enough global event could bring you there all out except nuclear war. But at that point, people wouldn't even care. It has to be simultaneous events that are controllable by humankind that don't get too out of control, but they all need to dovetail in and wrap into like a nice pizza dough that they can knead together to cast a huge, much wider net. Not each individual event or sets of events is all encompassing, but when you add them all together and you combine them, then it becomes the thing that will change. In addition to the BRICS currency and the asset-backed currencies and the US dollar, abandonment and reserve currency status, yoking and withdrawal. So the next slide, really, if you're going to head to the cities and you want to be part of this program, please remember, these will be your 3 laws to abide by. There'll be rationing of resources. And again, we come up with fairly even and efficiently. Strict enforcement of public safety. Again, you come into these high stress, very conflict zones within neighborhoods, that people are going to be fighting all the time. There's going to be a lot of crime. So they're coming in with an iron pipe to control it. This new phase where we're going, where you see all these things happening in the cities, is nothing in terms of control that will be dealt into these cities here to prevent criminal activity and maintain order. Once the breeding stock is in place for the plebeian or slave class, they're not going to let them out of there. Compliance, perfect. Breed more. We need more of that. Keeping just enough slave class going to perpetuate and allow the elite to continue through this phase. And I think that's well spoken enough there. But then with the resource conservation, we keep hearing conservation. It's been driven into us for 30 years. Well, limited use of energy and water is where you're going to go. Your resource is going to be so restricted if you get into these containment zones. You know, it'll be a human zoo. They'll give you the food. They'll give you the water. You'll be able to breed. It'll be one of those zones. It'll be like that rat program. You told me about this, Rex, where some scientists in the 1960s had set up like a mouse utopia or something. And then at the end of it, the mouses all went insane and the mice went insane. These zones will be set up to separate. So humanity is going to split into two different, now they're not going to be, they will be in the future, different Homo sapien sapien and a non-Homo sapien sapien. But in the beginning here, it's going to be the first split. It's going to be just a physical split of human Homo sapien sapiens into wild spaces, countryside, fringe dwellers, whatever you like to call it. There's a million terms for people who won't stay on that system that can provide their own outside the system and work with communities that want to stay out of that system. You know, it'll be a little bit step back in time, early 1900s, late 1800s. You know, for example, I was talking to somebody about welding. It'll be just, you know, you'll be able to get a blowtorch going so you can melt metals together, but there'll be no like this super extravagant like TIG and MIG welding and all that stuff. That you're going to go back to the basics. You got a hot flame shooting out of a head there, melt something together to repair it. And then you're going to get city dwellers. That will absolutely, this will be their life. I mean, we're very close to this now, even if you just wander through daily awakenings. You're very close to this. Except the elite who have their private jets and their yachts and the, you know, all these things. Otherwise, you're pretty close to that on what we see. The world's been reorganized since 2020. You think that fits for the laws for the confinement cities and the containment barriers?
Yeah, I do. I think that's a strong possibility. It's going to be, I mean, there could even be, if everything could be tracked and tagged, and if you're tracked and tagged constantly, they could have checkpoints that you would have to go through. It could be very extreme. You know, they could take blueprints and pages out of 1984 and combine it with the technologies of today and tomorrow. And depending on who is calling the shots at the top levels, you know, that's one of the things about all of these technologies that we're seeing come out. They've got so much potential, so much possibility. But who is pushing the buttons and who is deciding what these technologies do? That's what we need to ask ourselves. And then we need to ask ourselves, what do we do to be the change? What do we do to, you know, how do we use technologies to better humanity, to better society, to better the earth? And when I say that, I'm talking about like true happiness, you know, genuine health and liberty. I mean, and justice. Is that just cliche now?
I would hope not.
Me too.
I would pray not, actually. Combining of how I think those three events are going to move forward to get us to what we spoke about in the initial digital ration cards. You know, you're probably going to have to show ID when you go into the store. And it could be, in the beginning, it'll probably be just a regular government issued ID or eventually a digital ID. But I think in the beginning, everybody's cool with showing their driver's license, for example, to get into the store. Now, the next thing comes, if there's really a lot of crime and we come to this sort of shortage, and again, it's not, I don't think it's going to be a real, you know, a real shortage where things just aren't growing. I think there's going to be a lot of movement of just supply chains. And then what's left over is what the rest of the world gets, which will be not enough for the current population. At that point, then you'll probably have to prove funds also that you have money. Because, you know, these smash and grab mobs, or what do you call them, flash mobs. We talked about this, and I said, you know, you're going to start to see flash mobs around end of the year. And I was just anticipating that there would be flash mobs on a food storage center in the countryside somewhere multiple times. And then, hey, we need the army out in the countryside to protect food. And then, you know, that's the way that they could get, you know, people out here that wouldn't otherwise welcome. So maybe you have to prove the funds before you get into the store. And the flash mobs are, you know, to set that up. Oh, yeah, we got to show your ID. You got to have that. If you're going to go in, rationing, equal, everybody, completely equal. One for you, one for me, everybody. I second that. I third that. Everybody needs to be equal. We're going to protect the store. Everybody gets one. We got to pull together. Victory Gardens, you know how they sold us on all these wars of, you know, going without so many things when it was just to consolidate power for the next step of, you know, finance and consolidation of power at the end of that cycle. And everybody bought it, hook, line, and sinker. But this time it'll be a little bit different. Digital rationing card, You'll have to show some sort of ID. There'll be troops in the stores, and you'll have to probably show proof of funds, which could take many directions. Central bank digital currency on the UMA wallet or some kind of FedNow wallet. Either gold and silver in your hand, probably silver. Gold will be too valuable to take around. Or some of the old money that still might be valuable in itself, or something digital that's actually from an institution like JP Morgan, Bank of America, or Saks that's still around. That's sort of one step into the CBDC world and one step into my grandparents' old bank account world. But these things are going to move in tandem, as they go forward here. So that's what I talked about. And the rest of that was, but we all have the choice here to say no. We really do. We don't have to say yes to it. We don't.
It's going to be the narrative is going to be hackers. It's going to be hackers. And then they're going to blame it on...
Tell me more.
They're going to blame it on the Russians, and they're going to blame it on Patriots. And they are going to use that as a way to, like, if you can't get access to your bank account. I mean, do you remember how freaked out people were when they couldn't get gas for a couple of days in Texas? It was insane. People were getting in fistfights. Imagine now you can't get your money out of the bank. And this isn't just for people that are going paycheck to paycheck. I mean, this is for people of all different levels. So when you create a global system that you can essentially turn off access to somebody's funds, that's going to change the game. That's going to change the parameters. And so they're either going to start out, but see, this might be going over the edge. Like they may have to beta test this first, because that could cause too much problem. Like they may not be able to handle everybody. Like if the whole nation didn't get access to their monies, like are you going to have some rogue warriors that don't care what happens to them, and they won't be able to be controlled? That could cause some serious problems to the elite? I would think so. So the more I think about this, I think they're going to do beta tests. It's going to be certain banks that go under, and then there's going to be certain protocols, and then they're going to figure out ways to implement these. Especially the retired class. The retired class that has money, has 401, IRA, all that. They don't have access to that, or they think that the Russians are hacking it, or do they think that, Patriots are hacking it? Well, that's going to change their mindset real quick when they think their money's being messed with. I see all of it. I don't see it being nuclear. I don't see it being an EMP. There's already other cards that have been played. It's not going to be the alien card, because they're going to play that forever. They're never going to play that in full, but an actual bank runs, then bank viruses. And then, yes, that's what I see. That's my vision for this. I hope I'm wrong.
Yeah, because you wouldn't know when your power would turn back on. It would just go off. Might come on in a few days, and they'd be like, well, that was 2 days. We better get ready for that. And what if the next time it goes off for 6 weeks? Then it comes on, and you're like, oh, we got to get ready for 6 weeks. And it goes off for 2 days, and then it's back on. And they start playing the mind game of on, off. Like you never know when it's going off, how long it's going off. And that'd be scary. I mean, who's ready for 6 weeks of power out, and then suddenly it just turns back on like, hey, nothing, the same as it was. Yeah, you'll be in an entirely new world. Now, would they let the power go on long enough to like restart things and then psychologically or play with people's minds and just turn it back on again 4 days after, after people finally got a hot shower again and were able to cook on the stove and some stuff, and then turns off again.
Yeah, and then you could also...
They need to get it so bad. I'm sorry, Eric.
No, go ahead.
It needs to get so bad so you'll switch systems. That's the whole thing. It needs to get to that point so you will switch. Something's got to break down, completely broke down, so you will switch. Now, whether that is from people ditching the dollar or whether you say hackers, viruses, whatever, but it's got to go to that level before it can be rebooted, literally.
Wow. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. Although I'm just going to keep telling myself this, because this is true. Every action has an opposite and equal reaction. So for every dark action that is being performed, there's got to be something to counterbalance that. And let's focus on the positive. Let's focus on the light. Let's focus on being prepared, not scared, and figuring out ways that we can make a difference for our family and our community. Now, this is actually
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. I was going to say this went even longer than I expected. So thank you very much, man. I really appreciate it. And if we can, I'd like to do this again in a couple weeks.